What's up, TTM fam? Good morning. It's Sunday, September 21st, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Welcome to the Truth About Me podcast. I'm Eric, and this is episode 11. Um, I'm going to kind of start off with this. Life doesn't stop throwing you storms. It doesn't stop throwing you storms your way just because you've rebuilt and started moving forward. The difference now is how you respond. And every place that you go, every person that you meet is, going to create challenges. And that's something that you have to learn to navigate, both in positive situations and in negative ones, excuse me. Um, this episode is a guide to resilience and hope. You know, you have to realize that when you choose to make a decision to grow, um, it doesn't prevent challenges. It's almost like you get more. Why? Because you're being tested every step of the way. Speaking from a person that experienced addiction with alcohol and understanding that the choices that I made weren't the best ones. It ruined me personally. It ruined a lot of my relationships. So, taking, that, with that being kind of like the biggest storm that I experienced, in my mid 20s, and the reality and the weight that it held was pretty substantial. And that was kind of the wake up moment for me where I had to make a decision. It was go to jail, death, or be a productive member of society. And one of them's a throwaway, obviously death. But if I continue down this path, I very well could, or worse off, kill somebody, you know. So I chose to be a productive member of society and growing from there, and you know, making those choices of okay, what can I do? And I didn't ask for help at that point in time. I did it on my own. Now, was it the right thing? No, but it was an experience that I chose and a challenge that I chose to, make myself better and improve in areas. And it's taken quite a bit of time, to get where I want to be. I'm not quite there. I'm almost there, but still, the daily challenges that arise are something that you just keep chipping away. You have to realize the emotional struggles of dealing with this. My case, I thought I had a lot of friends. Turned out to be bar friends, and I still could go back to some of the old places that I used to frequent and probably see the same people, same clothes, same drinks, same stories. It didn't change. That's what they would do. And that's what I did. And I enjoyed that because it was, in a weird way, it was structure. Because I knew what the night would bring, but I didn't know. But I had kind of a blueprint because everybody did the same thing. So, getting used to now being alone and learning how to navigate things by myself. And, that's where I had to challenge myself. And there was some dark times, I'm not going to lie. Being in a funk and trying to lift yourself up out of that funk, it's tough. It really, really was tough. So it's something that you had to chip away at small pieces each and every day, and that's what I did. And that's what I continue to do to this day. Setbacks, like you think you're getting somewhere, and you're like, oh man, I was going to AA, with the AA really wasn't, my thing. I did it because legally I had to, but but I sat back, and me being an observer by nature and just listening to, you know, the stories of, a lot of these people. I just didn't, to me, I didn't, it didn't resonate with me. It didn't sit there like I got it, I understood it, but it just wasn't something that um, I was into. However, I took the tools that were there and I applied it to my day to day. My uncle was my sponsor, coming straight out, and he was he's a big Catholic, a devout Catholic. Goes to church every single day, and his way of dealing with alcoholism in his eyes was to follow Jesus Christ, follow the Bible. You can't go wrong. Now, at that point in time, unfortunately, my experiences with the church weren't good. Um, Catholic wise, nothing happened to me, but it just wasn't. There's so much turmoil within the Catholic churches that I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't. I wasn't gaining anything from it. So, but I took what he said and I applied. I took bits and pieces, excuse me, and applied it into my day to day, and that's how I adapted. That's how I was able to, continue to stay sober every single day. Um, and it worked. You know, Here I am 19 years later. So, the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is how much stress you deal with at work. That plays a major factor. If you're at a high-paced job, lots of stress. You're under a time crunch. Um, that can certainly factor in to um, those types of storms, because it's something that and I struggled with this as well. Was I would bring work home um, when I was in relationships, and even though I was sober, I would bring work home, and I found that was very detrimental because it put me in a bad mood. It put me automatically on the defensive. It put me blaming, whether it be my girlfriend or my ex-wife, um, on certain things, and that's not good, you know. I remember one time distinctly, way, 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 way back in the day. Um, I had a girlfriend. I was working nights, and she was just like, "Oh, we gotta do this, we gotta do that," and I just said, "No, I can't. I gotta go to work." And she's like, "Well, you're doing this and you're doing that. Like, there's never time for us." And I ended the relationship. I was like, you know what? I can't do this. I'm done. And I ended that relationship. Why? Because I continuously brought work home, and that's what my focal point was, and I didn't care, unfortunately. You know, these are the things I look back on now and realize that the care that I put in was zero when it came to relationships, because it was all about me at that time, and that was bad. It was really, really bad. Speaking of relationships, the amount of turbulence that you can get within relationships. Um, you know, at some point in time, everybody shows their true colors. Um, whether it's in the beginning, middle, or end, it depends on the person, depends on the situation. Um, you hope to find it out in the beginning because so you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. However, it doesn't happen. Everybody's in the honeymoon phase. Put my best foot forward. Can't see this, can't see that. Don't want them to see this. So, and that's tough to navigate, especially if you're going through some things and you don't have a confidant, you don't have a partner that is understanding of what you're going through, and that's why it's important, especially to me now, is that I communicate everything. Doesn't matter how big or little it is. Um, I make sure that my girlfriend knows everything that's going on with me, so she can adjust accordingly. And and truthfully, I expect the same because I'm not a mind reader. So. Um, and that's because communication is big, um, especially when it comes to turbulent times in your life. It's just being able to sit there and talk and have somebody who you trust, take and listen and kind of guide you, um, the way that they can, and just be there for support. Um, when it comes to tools that you learn to rely on, my big thing was routines, um, daily routines. That was, that's still um, my top thing. It's like, okay, what do I do? I am going to wake up. I am going to take a shower. I am going to get ready for work. Eat breakfast, go to work, eat lunch, finish the day, go to the gym, and then whatever happens afterwards happens afterwards. Whether it's meeting my girlfriend, going shopping, and then cooking afterward, meal prep, um, doing laundry, doing household stuff, mowing the lawn, taking the trash out, like just finding out your daily routines, and that to me was, that was instrumental. If I didn't have that, then I don't know where I'd be. But it started off slow. Um, it was first getting my sleep squared away because I was a night owl. I was staying up at all hours of the night, going to bed at 4 or 5 in the morning, and not being productive. Once I kind of exhausted myself and put myself on a normal schedule, it was, and that's something that took time. And to be, truthfully honest, is I struggled with that, even though it was a part of my routine. Um, I had to learn different coping mechanisms, rather than that were non-destructive, and a lot of it was talking, a lot of it was journaling, writing stuff down. A lot of it was through gym therapy. That's my, I say it jokingly, that's my church, to go there, excuse me, can go there and, um, work everything out with a solid workout. And but another thing is, something that I'm diving into now is faith and spiritual practices. Now, this is brand new to me. I've always believed in a higher power. I just never had a definition of it. So I am taking that step um, at this point in time. Check out I put out a special episode last week about my experiences, so check that out. Core values, another one where it's you really have to kind of lock in like what are your non-negotiables when it comes to core values. So those I urge you to write down, um, and find out what you want. What is the bare minimum of that? What are you expecting? Well, I don't want to say expecting, but what are you hoping to accomplish with that? And keep it simple, honestly. You don't want to get too deep. It's very easy to think of like, oh, this, that, this, and really keep it small, keep it all type of thing. You'll thank yourself later when it comes down to it. And then we get into you know back from survival mode into responding with stability. So when you're in survival mode, you don't have feelings for anybody else. You barely have feelings for yourself. Excuse me. Barely have feelings for yourself. But once you start to love yourself and take care of yourself and believe in yourself, then the stability comes because you are more confident, you are more aware, and you don't. When you answer something, it's not a reaction. It is something that you have thought out, as opposed to survival mode, where the smallest thing could set you off, and you're just gonna be, you're just a ticking time bomb, basically. Um, so when you look at it like, between those things, ticking time bomb over here compared to, calm, stable, um, and ready to go with an answer, there's a big difference, and you'll enjoy that. I guarantee you will. It's just something that you have to allow yourself is, you know, allow yourself to do, and give yourself grace while going through this journey. Is not everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows, so to speak. There's going to be more dark clouds that kind of show up that were unexpected. Um, but you navigate through those the best way you know how. Which kind of brings me, to my next point of hard moments and you, you know, um, reflecting and when you're in those hard moments, the only thing that you really know is what you've previously done. Um, and that's, falling back into old habits, which you do not want to do. Um, the old habits got you to where you are, and excuse me, you're here to, um, make better choices for yourself, for whether it be for you individually, um, for you and your significant other, for your relationship, for your family, whatever. You just want to make sure that, in those hard moments, you don't fall back into those old patterns because it will crush you and ruin you. And, you know, and that's something where if you work long and hard, you know, I would hope, and I see it with myself today, is that, all of your hard work does pay off. Um, but you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in the journey that you have set for yourself. Um, and I think if you do that, you are going to see some great positive changes, and you're going to feel so much better about yourself. And everything will just kind of start falling into place slowly but surely. Um, because there would be times where I'd sit there and, you know, um, I'm trying to think of a, trying to think of a time where, um, and actually, I guess I can attribute it back to my early 20s when, I had, made a decision, like I was hanging out, decided to, hit up one of my ex-girlfriends and, try to rekindle that. And it didn't go well, truthfully, um, because when, you know, we were excited, at first, and then we went out, and then because of, my drinking and then my mindset at that point in time, it just became ugly. And that was probably one of the last times where I was just like, I can't do this, like, and to get into the amount of trouble that I got into, yeah, it just kind of reaffirmed that. Um, but I take those, and I live those every single day, and say, okay, well, this is what I'm not gonna do, right? And you have to have those conversations with yourself, truthfully, because if you don't, like, talking out loud and writing stuff down is different from talking within your mind. Why? Because when you're talking out loud, you are holding yourself accountable. Like, you are verbalizing it, or you're writing something down because now you have something to go back to and reference, on a particular day. And that's powerful stuff. Excuse me. That's powerful stuff, honestly. And that has been one thing that, being able to talk and being able to, now whether it's talking to myself, talking to a friend, talking to my girlfriend, relative, they know you the best. So it helps you, but also, there are other people that may feel shame, may feel guilt. I don't want to burden anybody with this. Burden them, or write it down and then reevaluate afterwards, or have somebody read what you wrote. Simple as that. How do we redefine hope? It's not blind positivity, but it's confidence that storms pass. Now, when you look at it, when things are happening in the now, right? In the moment, they seem like it's never ending. Um, like, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen, and you could be right. At that point in time, it is the worst thing that could have happened. However, it happened. But keep this in mind: is that what happens today won't necessarily occur tomorrow, and then the day after, and the day after, so on and so forth. So, you know, in a week, you could forget about what happened on that Tuesday, unless it's something extremely traumatic. But I'm just talking just kind of in generalities here. um, and another thing that's kind of got me through is that you if you think you're having a bad day, just understand that there are people having worse days than you are, and it's life doesn't stop no matter what happens. However, in due time, whatever happened on that particular day is now just a memory. Um, and you have to kind of keep that in mind because, you know, storms, they'll pass. They'll come down heavy, they'll come down, aggressive, angry, and then all of a sudden, a couple hours later, the next day, boom, no storm. And now you're left to kind of pick up the pieces of, what you went through. So you want to use hope um, for as fuel for perseverance. You want to make sure that you are, surrounding yourself with good, positive people. Um, Especially within your circle. Keep your circle small. Why? Because you're better off in that sort of capacity now. I get, all of you, extroverts that, life of the party. Hey, here I am. Look at me. I need all the attention. Give all the attention to me. That'll work for you. But majority of the people, like myself, no, it doesn't work. But then again, you also have to ask yourself, if you're an extrovert and you need all the attention, is how many of those people can you trust? You know, ask yourself this. Can you ask them a serious question and get a serious, solid answer from them, and, have that answer be believable? The only way to know is to test it, find out. If they say, "Oh well, no, I can't answer that," then guess what? They're not your friend. They're just there to hang out with the life of the party. Excuse me. You just have to, you know, stay your course. Whatever journey that you write, follow it. And understand that you're going to lose people along the way. And that's okay. Because those people weren't meant to be there for the long haul. They were there simply for the short term. So it's a good thing that um, you drop that quote unquote dead weight because you don't need to be carrying that. You have bigger fish to fry, throughout your journey. And you're going to meet tons of people. You may meet people, every single day. You may meet somebody for 5 minutes, you know. Um, so you kind of have to take those into consideration, during your journey, and like, and I'll say this with confidence that, um, you really have to believe in yourself. Really, you do. And understand that, storms don't define you. The way you weather them does. So, you know, understand that, if you're going through a negative time in your life, whether it's personal, professional, um, just understand that, the pain that you feel on that is something that's just going to be that. You're going to feel it for that day. For the majority of the situations that you come across, even in death, like you lose somebody you love, whether it's your significant other, whether it's a family member, coworker, whatever, you're gonna feel a certain way for a while, um, and everybody's different on how they process things. Some people, have ice ice water running through their veins and they're unfazed, while others go, you know, they go to the deepest, darkest, can't function, can't do anything. And that's okay, but you just also have to understand that, that time is just temporary because, when it happens one day, each day as it passes, it will get easier, you know. So, um, you know, keep that in mind as you're going through this journey is that, with the storms, you know, that they'll pass. One question I want to leave you with is what's one storm you've weathered that made you stronger? Leave a comment. Let me know. Love to discuss it with you guys. A little tease about episode 12 integration, living the new life daily. And with that being said, fam, you know what? I truly appreciate all you guys that, click on the videos and, support me. Um, I hope that my messages are, getting out there and they're not too confusing, but I hope it's making your day a little bit brighter, and understanding that I am here, um, with you in this journey, in my journey, in our journey. So, for that, I want to thank you. But with that being said, I want you guys to enjoy your Sunday, get after it, hit the gym, talk to a friend, tell people that you love them. Don't hold anything back. Just let it fly, man, because you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And that being said, we'll catch you next week.